All right, and welcome as we read together about the Treaty of Paris, but not just any Treaty of Paris. There's been a lot of them, and there's two you have to learn about this year. 1763, specifically the Treaty of Paris that ended the 7 Years' War, which means it also ended the French and Indian War. And it was ratified by Parliament, the lawmaking body similar to today's Congress in America. It was ratified or passed, accepted by them in 1763. So the Treaty of Paris of 1763 ended the French and Indian War as well as the 7 Years' War between Great Britain and France, their respective allies. So for Great Britain, that would be the colonies, and for France, that would be mostly the Native Americans. In the terms of the treaties, France gave up all of its territories in mainland North America. It's gone. France is out. You're out of the game. Effectively ending any foreign military threat to the British colonies there. The Spanish were still there, but they were so far away, and there were so many different Native American tribes in between them. There was no more threat. Britain won. They got it all. During the war, British forces had scored important overseas victories against France. Not only had the British conquered French Canada, they also won victories in India. They also captured the French islands, their colonies in the Caribbean, so the West Indies. In March of 1762, French King Louis XV issued a formal call for peace talks. The British government was also interested in ending the war, because that stuff costs money. The 7 Years' War had been enormously expensive, and the government had to pay for the war with debt. They had to finance the war with debt. When you say you're going to finance something, it means, take a house, for example. Do you have hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for a house like that? Most people don't. So they finance it. They say, I will give you $1,000 every month for 30 years. And eventually I will have paid my house off. So you finance it. So Britain had gone into debt. Britain would gain all of the French territory east of the Mississippi, while Spain would get to keep Cuba in exchange for handing Florida over to Great Britain. French territories west of the Mississippi would become Spanish, along with the port of New Orleans. In return for these cessions, that is a 7th grade vocabulary word you should have learned. A cession is when one group, person, or country gives over land to another. Along with the territory of India, Africa, and the Mediterranean island of Minorca, France would retain, they got to keep, the Caribbean islands, West Indies islands. They would regain those. British had captured during the war. The British government also promised to allow French Canadians to freely practice Catholicism and provided for French fishing rights off of Newfoundland. Despite what seemed like a success, the Treaty of Paris, 1763, ultimately encouraged dissension between Anglo-American colonists and the British government because their interests in North America no longer coincided. What the colonists wanted and what the British wanted were no longer the same. The British government no longer wanted to maintain an expensive military presence, and its attempts to manage a post-treaty frontier policy that would balance colonists' and Indians' interests would prove ineffective and even counterproductive. It would work against itself. Coupled with differences between the imperial government and colonists on how to levy taxes to pay for debts on wartime expenses, the Treaty of Paris, 1763, ultimately set the colonists on the path towards seeking independence. even as when it was passed, it seemed like it made the British Empire stronger than ever. See, what it looked like is you have France and England, and they have their big colonies, and then boom, just like that, with this treaty, England owns it all. And it's so far away from its competitors, the Spanish across the river of Mississippi, that England just dominated. But it made a lot of Native Americans upset. It made a lot of French nationalists upset. The British colonists felt like they should be able to go into these new lands and they should be able to settle them because they won the war. But the British back in London said, whoa, 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 that's expensive. You want to move into these lands and take them. That means we're going to have to fight off with the army anyone who tries to hurt you. That costs money. All of a sudden, the British colonists and Britain no longer think the same. And we'll continue next time. I hope you're enjoying, and I hope this helps.